Hello and welcome to your Lettings Finance training. In this video we're going to be having a look at an introduction to finance. In this video we will be looking at your configuration, your finance menus and dashboard, setting up your landlords for finance, posting opening balances, cancelling transactions and posting journals. Before we jump over into Expert Agent to have a look at that, I'm just going to talk you through the subsequent finance videos that are available for you. Those are tenancy finance, receiving monies, creating invoices and credits, paying your landlords, other types of payments such as contractor and agency payments, and deposit management. Following on from those, you'll have a reconciliation video, a video that covers the reporting side of Expert Agent financials, imported statement reconciliation, rent guarantee, and a daily procedures video. Alongside these videos, you can also book onto live finance training, which runs on a Friday morning. You can book that via your top help menu in Expert Agent and book training. So getting started with your introduction, Expert Agent is accounting software for your client account. It will allow you to record and reconcile any transactions that have been posted through your client account, or your rent account as you may call that. The system works on a double entry bookkeeping system in much the same way as an office accounting software such as Sage might do. So for every debit there will be a corresponding credit. These debits and credits will work in the background for you, with money moving through the various nominals to allow you to receive in your rents, make your landlord payments, pay your contractors, pay your agency payments, etc. Along with allowing you to break down and report on the different kinds of fees that you are charging and paying out on behalf of contractors. It's worth noting that Expert Agent works on a standard accounting basis rather than a cash accounting basis. This means all your reports in terms of your invoices will be based on when that invoice was charged rather than when you received that money. Because Expert Agent is just a software for recording the transactions that have gone through your bank, it's not linked to your bank account in any way. So any payments that you make through Expert Agent that you're making through the system, you will then need to manually make through your bank account as well. Having said that, there are various reports and different functions that we will have a look at in these training videos that will make this process more automated for you if you so wish. So for those of you who are moving your finance over to Expert Agent, so your business is running its finance elsewhere at the moment and it's moving it across into Expert Agent, you won't automatically have access to the finance functions that we're going to look at in these videos. We do need to enable this for you. The best way to get this enabled when you're ready is to go to your top help menu and go into the Learning Centre. Within the Learning Centre, if you go to the FAQs and go to the Lettings Finance FAQs, you'll see this option here, why can't I see the Lettings Finance functions and how can I add them? If you click on that link, it will run you through the various stages involved in getting your finance enabled, including training, loading your data, etc. And the third step is completing your configuration questionnaire. So you'll need to complete the questionnaire and submit that. Once we've received that questionnaire from you, we'll book in to do your configuration review, and during that review appointment, we will enable your finance for you. In the meantime, if you want to have a practice with any of the functions that we're going to have a look at in these training videos, you're more than welcome to do so by jumping yourselves over into training mode, that you can do by clicking on your profile at the top and clicking on Add Me to Training. Just because you haven't had the finance enabled on your agency yet, it doesn't mean that you won't have access to those finance functions in training mode. So get yourselves over into training mode and you can have a practice with any of the functions that we look at within these training videos within that training mode there without affecting any of your live data. So the first section for us to have a look at will be our configuration. You need to be a super user to access the configuration section. As a super user, via your Tools menu, you'll be able to see configuration in the top left-hand corner. And the first thing we're going to have a look at is getting staff profiles set up to have those finance functions available. So under Business Configuration on the left-hand side, about halfway down you'll have Agency Staff. If you click on Agency Staff, it will give you a list of everyone within your agency. Any super users will be listed in red and any standard users will be listed in black. You'll need to click on the name of the person that you're setting up and go to Permissions at the bottom. In the grey bar you'll click on Finance and you'll want to tick to enable finance. As you tick that tick box, additional permissions underneath will appear, so it's just a case of ticking through anything you want your user to have access to and leaving blank anything you don't. When you're happy, you're going to save and then save again and move through any additional users that you need to set up. Once you've set that up, the next thing to have a look at is your bank accounts. You'll find that in your Lettings Configuration section in the bottom right hand corner. When you open up your bank account screen, what you should see is that you've got a client account in here and that is blank. You'll need to click into it and you'll need to fill in the details on the screen with the details of your client account itself. So you want bank name, and then you'll definitely want the bottom three, account name, number and sort code. If you know the address, you can fill that in as well before you save. In terms of bank accounts that you're adding in here, you'll add any client account in, so any account that your tenants are paying rents into and you're paying landlords out of. You may also have the need to add a separate deposit account in here if you hold your deposits in a separate bank account and you use an insurance-based deposit scheme. If you need to do that, you can use the Add Bank Account button in the bottom left-hand corner, and again, enter the details as you have done with your client account. You want to complete the bank name, account name, number and sort code, and then the address details if you have them before you save. What you won't need to add in this section is your business account or your office account. As we've said previous, Expert Agent doesn't manage your business account, it only manages your client account, so there will be no need to add your office bank account details into this section here. The only bank accounts you'll be adding in will be bank accounts that you process client monies through. Once you're happy you've got your bank accounts added correctly, you can close out of this section. And the next one to have a look at is financial defaults just underneath there. Working down the left-hand side, you'll have your default bank account, so that will be set to your client account. You can change that if needed using the drop down. You'll want that to be the most frequent bank account that you're using in terms of rents coming in and rents being paid out. Underneath that, you've got check clearance days. So if you do receipt in checks from tenants for rents at all, you can pop a number of clearance days in here. And what that will mean is those funds will show as received and they will show as received on the landlord statement. But when you go into your landlord payment section, that landlord will show in red rather than in blue because those funds will show as not cleared. When those number of days have passed, that balance will automatically clear and your landlord will change to blue for payment. Then you've got default payment method. So this is the most common method of receipt you get in from your tenants. So for most of you, that's probably going to be bank transfer. It might be standing order or direct debit, but set that most common method there from the drop down. Every time you do record in a receipt, you get the option to change that manually at the point of the receipt, but it will just save you some time with most of your receipts there by setting that one. You've then got last invoice number. So if you're wanting to start afresh with your invoice numbering in Expert Agent, you want to set that to 0. And then the first invoice you'll produce in Expert Agent will be invoice number 1. If you're wanting to continue from where you are with your current system, your current software, your current invoice numbering sequence, you want to put the last number in the old sequence in there, and then Expert Agent will continue from that point for you. You've got your NRL tax rate, so that should be set to 20, so just double check that one and that matches up with the current HMRC rate. Then we've got guaranteed rent delay. So if you do use guaranteed rent within your agency, and please feel free to refer to our guaranteed rent video for more information on this, you can set up a default number of delays between when the rent is due from the tenant and when that guaranteed rent shows to be paid to the landlord. You do always get the option to set that on an individual basis with each tenancy, but that will just be your default setting. We've then got allow property guaranteed rent. So if you as a business have a guaranteed rent scheme where you will pay the landlord regardless of not whether there is a tenant in the property, you can set up property guaranteed rent within Expert Agent. And again, that's explained in more detail within our guaranteed rent video, but you'll want to tick that box if that's a scenario that applies to you. We've got 2 tick boxes underneath for automatically charge rent and automatically charge invoices. You'll want these both ticked before you go live. These are the options that pull all your rents and any recurring invoices that you have set up through into your system via the overnight rent process that we run every day for you. Last option at the bottom here is your display warning if deposit exceeds the threshold set in the Tenant Fees Act 2019. This is for the English tenancies, whereby if your deposit is more than 5 weeks worth of the rent, Expert Agent will alert you to the fact that that deposit is higher than it thinks it should be, and it will give you the opportunity to change the deposit at that point. That will be for any new tenancies when you're setting them up, that will be when you're charging any deposits, or when you're doing any tenancy renewals. On the right hand side, you'll have your VAT section. And within the VAT section will be all the default VAT rates that we set up for you. So you should have in there standard, exempt, 0 rated and no VAT. If you're missing a VAT rate in there or you need to get an additional VAT rate added, please log a support ticket and the support team will be able to help you out with adding any additional VAT rates in here. You'll see there are 3 columns. You'll have your VAT rate type, you'll have your export description and the VAT rate. The most important one to have a look at is your standard VAT rate. If you are VAT registered as a business, your standard VAT rate needs to be 20%, or whatever the relevant percentage is for where you're located in the world. If you aren't VAT registered as a business, your standard rate does need to be set to 0. So again, please feel free to contact the support team and they will be happy to change that over for you. During your financial configuration appointment, when we enable your finance for you, we will go through and make sure this is set up correctly at that point. The reason that you might want to have a look within this VAT rate section will be the export description, the middle column. If you are a VAT registered business and you need to export your invoices out of Expert Agent across into your office accounting software for MTD purposes, what you'll need to do is you'll need to set your export description to match with your VAT rates within your financial accounting software that you use for the business. Within Expert Agent, we support Sage, we support Xero, and we support QuickBooks. So with any of those 3 softwares, whatever the VAT rate is within that software, you will need to set that up in here. The way you can do that is by clicking on each VAT rate in turn that you're going to be using. The first 2 fields will be greyed out, but the export description will be editable, so you'll need to set that as need be. So for example, for anybody using Sage, you will probably need this to be T1, your standard VAT rate code there, and then you can save that and it will change in the column. For your exempt, again, for example, if you're using Sage, you might need that to be T2 and save that there. We can't recommend what your export descriptions need to be. You need to set them as to what matches with your financial accounting software. If that's something you don't do yourself and your bookkeeper or your accountant does that for you, they will be able to advise as to what those export codes are. Setting those codes correctly will mean that when you export out of Expert Agent into your financial accounting software, these VAT codes will automatically match up and you won't need any manual intervention. For any agencies that have sub-branches and you're also running your finance out of those sub-branches, you will need to set this up in each sub-branch that you're processing finance for. Once you've finished with your VAT rates and you're happy with those, you're going to save and back to your main lettings configuration section. The next one to have a look at will be standard invoices. Your standard invoices section allows you to set up any invoices that you use on a frequent basis to save you time when it comes to charging either a landlord or a tenant for one of these fees. Now, these are standard sales invoices, so for fees due to you as the agent, and they are for anything that's over and above your monthly management fees. So you don't need to set up your percentage fees in here, your 10%, your 8% of the rents, etc., whatever they may be. It's anything over and above that. So those might be setup fees that you charge to your landlords. They might be let-only fees that you charge for let-only. They might be renewal fees. They might be late fees to tenants. any permitted charges you can get away with charging to tenants. They might be things that you'll want to have a think about setting up in here. Anything that you charge on a regular basis, if you set it up as a standard invoice, when it comes time to charge either a landlord or a tenant for one of those fees, rather than having to type out the details of that same charge again and again, you'll just be able to use the standard invoice button that we have a look at in our invoices video and charge that fee to the landlord or the tenant. The way you can add those in is by using the Add New Invoice button in the bottom left-hand corner, giving your invoice a description, and then clicking the Add Item to this invoice. You can have as many items on one invoice as you wish. You'll select the nominal for each item. You'll select the VAT rate, and then you'll pop in the net amount, and you'll save. If you need to add any additional items, you can do by using the Add button again. When you're happy, you're going to save, and that will add it into that list for you. Once you're done with your standard invoices, the next thing to have a look at in your lettings configuration is your nominal ledgers. Within your nominal ledgers, you'll have 4 columns. You'll have nominal code, you'll have nominal name, you'll have export code, and you'll have nominal type. Within the nominal type, your nominals here will be broken down into 3 categories. You'll have expenses, you'll have income, and then you'll have asset liability at the bottom. Your asset liability nominals are mainly your control accounts. They are the accounts that make the double entry in expert agent work for you. They'll be the ones that are moving the money from tenancy to landlord, landlord to contractor, landlord to agency, that kind of thing. They'll be working in the background seamlessly for you, so you probably won't use them very much, if at all. The main types of nominals to have a look at in this section are the income nominals. It's your income nominals that you will use for your sales invoices, so your fees that you're charging to landlords and tenants. And the purpose of those income nominals is to allow you to have a bit more of a breakdown on exactly where you're making your money in terms of the client account. So rather than just looking at all your invoices that have come out of the client account in one lump sum, which you definitely can do if that's the way you want to report, you can use your nominals to break down and drill down in a bit more detail on exactly where that money is coming from, in the same way that you can in your office accounting by using those different nominal codes for your sales. So it may be that you want to lump everything together that's coming out of the client account under your agency fees nominal and just have everything together. But it may be that you want to see a breakdown of how much you've made for management fees, there's percentage fees, there's agency fees there, versus how much you've made for setup fees, versus how much money you've taken from tenants, versus let-only fees, that kind of thing. So if you'd like a bit more of a detailed breakdown, you can use your nominals to do that. We provide you a few standard nominals, including agency fees there, arrangement fees, finding fees, etc. But then you can also add any additional nominals that you want into the section by using the Add Nominal Ledger in the bottom left-hand corner. If you're adding any new nominals in, you will need to fill in all 4 options there: nominal code, nominal name, export code, and the ledger type. For your ledger type, in the scenario that we're talking about here, it's going to be an income nominal that you're choosing. When you're setting these codes, the code and nominal name are for internal use in Expert Agent. The nominal name will be what you see in your reports, etc., as the nominal that's used. The nominal code is the code that Expert Agent uses to run your reporting in the background. Those two can be the same if you want. You've then got export code as the third one. Now the export code is the one that will be used when you're exporting your invoices out of Expert Agent as part of your MTD legislation to combine those invoices with your office accounting. If you use a program such as Sage, what you want to do is put the Sage code that you want this nominal to be mapped against in here. So for example, that might be your 4001, whatever that may be. Whatever code you pop in there, that will be the code that will pull onto your report when you export your invoices. What you'll want to do is ensure that any nominal that you're using has an export code filled in. These export codes will match with the nominal code in Expert Agent by default, but you can edit any of them to match with your accountancy software as you need to. So for example, if you wanted to start using the arrangement fees nominal, you can find it here, and you can edit your export code and your nominal name to match with those Sage, Xero, QuickBooks codes as you need. Again, we can't recommend what these nominal names and nominal codes need to be, but if you don't do your accounting yourselves in office and you have a bookkeeper or accountant that does that for you, they'll be able to advise what these need to be to match up with your codes in your office accounting software. Once you're happy, you can save. As with your financial defaults, for any businesses that have a sub-branch and you process finance through the sub-branch as well, you'll need to ensure that you've come in here and set these codes and names to match with your financial accounting software in each branch that you process the finance for. The last section to have a look at is your Making Tax Digital. This will only be relevant for any VAT registered businesses that are exporting their invoices out of Expedagent across into their accountancy software. You need to set this section up for any offices you are going to be running an export for. So for multi-branches, if you're going to be exporting your invoices on an office by office basis, you'll need to set that up in each office. If you're going to be running one export for all branches from a head office or from a main lettings branch, then you'll only need to set this section up within the main branch. You'll need to select your financial accounting software from the drop-down. As said earlier, Expedagent supports 3 packages. Those are Sage, Xero and QuickBooks, so select your option as needed. Once you've selected your package, you've then got some additional options below. You can ask Expedagent to use an invoice and credit note prefix within your export. What that will do is include the prefix as you set here, alongside your invoice number on your export. So for example, if you wanted to add a C in there, because all your invoices were coming from the client account, you could add that in there. And then when your invoices are imported into Sage, that invoice reference number, as Sage uses, will have a C in front of that invoice number. You can also ask Expedagent to summarise your invoices and credit notes at nominal level. So if you don't want to pull every individual invoice through that appears on your review sales invoices report into your office accounting separately, and you just want to pull totals for each nominal that you've used, you can tick this tick box here, and that will mean that when you run your report is run at summary level rather than on invoice by invoice level. You've also got the option here below for sales invoice customer and purchase invoice customer. You can complete these, and what that will mean is rather than each invoice, if you decide to run your report on individual invoices, rather than pulling through with the individual landlord or tenant name on the report, it will pull through with the reference that you provide here. So I could set that as what you'll see when I type into these fields is that for Sage, these fields need to be 8 characters long. That's a restriction put on that reference in Sage rather than an Expedagent restriction. So you want to make sure that that matches up exactly. For either of the other softwares, so Xero and QuickBooks, you'll have a longer reference there. You'll have 21 characters to play with. Once you're happy, you're going to save in the bottom right-hand corner, and that will make sure that when you come to run your VAT export, the relevant settings will be applied. The very last thing that you can do within your lettings configuration in terms of your finance is to lock your financial records. This will be useful for not only those people who are reconciling within Expedagent and making sure that Expedagent matches penny to penny with your bank account. It will also be important for those using your MTD report in terms of making sure that when you've reported for something and accounted for it, no one can go back in and change anything. So locking your financial records might be something you decide to do at the end of each quarter. It might be something you decide to do at the end of each financial year. You may well do it month on month once you've exported your invoices or even made your agency payments. What the financial lock will do is it will make sure that no one can add anything in with a date prior to that lock date. It will also make sure they can't cancel anything prior to that lock date. Because only super users can access the configuration, only super users can put a lock. But to do it, you'll need to come to the Lock Financial Records. You'll just enter the lock date using the calendar there. And you'll click the save icon, and those transactions will be locked. So coming out of your configuration, the next thing we're going to have a look at is your finance menus and dashboards. There are 2 places that you'll see the finance options within Expedagent. The first of which is from the black toolbar. You'll have a finance option in there. And then also in every tenancy, landlord and contractor record, you'll have a right-click option and the finance menu will also display there. If we start with the main finance menu though, the top option on the finance menu is your finance dashboard. When you open your finance dashboard, it will display like this by default. The top section will be your tenancy outstanding finance. This will show you any charges that have been raised against tenants, so rent charges, deposits, etc. that are outstanding, so charges that you've raised that haven't been paid, and you can receive those payments in from here. The bottom half of the screen will show you some finance quick links. The top few are default quick links, and they are shortcuts through to other areas of Expert Agent, so charging rent, your landlord payments, contractor payments, agency payments, and reviewing your payments, along with cancel transactions. And then underneath you'll have some configurable quick links, and you can have this set up to display any quick links that you wish. To edit this, you'll click the cog icon. All the available finance quick links will display in the list, and you can tick to show the ones that you would like to display on the dashboard. Continuing on down through the rest of the finance options, you have rent arrears, so this will give you access to your rent arrears report. You'll have the option to manually pay guaranteed rent. You'll see your payments sub-menu that will contain your options for paying your landlords, paying your contractors, paying yourselves as the agent, paying your NRL tax, and your payments to make report. You'll have your reporting sub-menu that will contain all of the different financial reports within there. The main ones to have a look at are always your bank reconciliation and your ALA report. You'll have your review sub-menu there, so you can review your sales invoices and also your purchase invoices. You'll have your accounts sub-menu, where you'll have access to reconciliation, journals and bank transfers. You can manually charge rent and charge invoices. You'll have a cancel transactions option. Outstanding transactions, unallocated funds reports, and your managed deposits. If we open up a landlord record, and right click from the landlord record, you'll see the financial sub-menu there. From a landlord record, you have the option to pay that specific landlord their guaranteed rent, create an invoice for that landlord, add a contractor invoice on for the landlord, create a recurring invoice and manually charge that recurring invoice. You'll have credit options for your various invoices. You can post an opening balance. You can refund NRL tax that you haven't yet paid over to HMRC. If the landlord has multiple properties, you can reallocate funds between those properties. You can transfer funds back to the tenant. You can create an annual summary report for them. You can have a look at their individual audit trail. You can cancel a transaction that related to that particular landlord, and you can receive in payments for them. The options are fairly similar from a tenancy record. Again, it's a right-click financial. You can manually charge rent or charge a deposit to that tenant. You can force a guaranteed rent through for that tenancy. You can create an invoice for them or add a contractor invoice on for them. You can create and charge recurring invoices. You can credit various invoices. You can post an opening balance that relates to the tenant. You can refund tenant funds that are on account. You can write off any rents that are now not needed. You can transfer monies across to the landlord for funds that are outside of rent. You can print a statement for the tenant, cancel transactions that relate to that tenant, or receive in a payment for that tenant. From a contractor record, the right-click finance menu is smaller, you'll just have the option to cancel a transaction for that particular contractor. We'll next have a look at Landlord Setup. So before you go live with using Expert Agent Finance, it's a good idea to ensure that you've got your landlord set up correctly. So if we open a Landlord Record, on the Landlord Record you'll have a Financial Details tab. Within the Financial Details tabs, you'll have options to add in all the relevant financial details for that landlord, such as their bank account, and any reference that you want to put on their particular payments. If you want any particular payment notes to show in the landlord payment screen, you can add those in here, and you'll be alerted to those when you go to pay this landlord. If you're running annual statements for the landlord and you want those to continue from your current software, you can add the last landlord statement number in here. If your landlord is non-resident, you'll want to tick the non-resident landlord tick box, and then you'll want to enter the date the landlord became NRL. If they're exempt from paying tax and you have the exemption certificate, you'll add the certificate number in there, and you'll pop in the date they became exempt, and that way they'll be recorded correctly within the system. If they ever return to the UK, you can enter the NRL up to and including date to stop tax charging past that point. If their exemption ever expires, you can add the exempt up to and including date in here, and then tax will start charging again for you. If you had a letter from HMRC to confirm that the landlord is subject to a different rate than the standard rate, you can override the default tax and enter the special rate being given to that landlord in here. Remember, as with other areas of Expert Agent, any changes you make to the records, save them before you leave the screen. If your landlord has multiple properties and you make some of those payments for some of the properties to separate accounts, so you don't pay to the default bank account for that landlord, you pay into a separate account, you'll want to go to the property record and to the financial details tab of that property record and add the bank account details in here. That way, when you're making the payments to the landlord for this particular property, the payments will show to go to the separate bank account rather than the landlord main account. So just to clarify that, by default you're adding the bank details to the landlord record and their financial details tab. If you have a landlord that has more than one property and payments go to separate accounts for the separate properties, you'll make sure you've added the bank account details onto the financial details tab of the property record. Once we've got our landlord set up, the next thing we need to have a think about will be posting any opening balances. And in terms of your opening balances, what we suggest is that you pick a date that you're going to go live with Expert Agent from. So pick a date that gives yourself enough time to get all of your landlords entered in and set up correctly, or your tenancies or your properties entered into the system, and that's going to give you enough time to check all your opening balances and make sure everything's set up correctly before going live with running your finance through the system. Lots of agents will pick the beginning of a new month, some will pick the beginning of a new financial year. It's whatever is going to work best for you. But once you've got that date, what you're going to need is a closing balance of the day before. And from that balance, you'll want a breakdown of that balance. So of that £5,000 that's in your client account of that date, what's the breakdown of that balance? Whose money is that? Do you have maybe £1,000 that belongs to tenant A because they paid this money to you and you've yet to process that across to your landlord? Do you have £500 from tenant B because they overpaid last month slightly and you've got that to go towards the next month's rent? Do you have £200 that you're holding on account for one of your landlords for maintenance float? What's the breakdown of the balance in your client account as of that day? Once you've got that, you can begin to post that into Expedagent as your opening balance. You'll post your opening balances onto the record that balance relates to. So if it's tenant money, you're going to be posting that onto the tenancy record. And if it's landlord money, you're going to be posting that onto your landlord record. So the first thing to do is to get that breakdown, and then we can begin to post that breakdown into the system. So if one of your balances relates to your landlord, you are going to come onto your landlord record, and you are going to right-click Financial and use that post-opening balance option that we talked through. You'll have the transaction date as your first option. So you want to set that transaction date as your opening balance date. So let's just say, in this example, we decided that we were going to use the first of the month. From a landlord, you'll always have the option to assign the property to that balance. So if your landlord has multiple properties, make sure you're selecting the correct property from the drop down there. You'll have a description which will default to opening balance for and then the landlord name, so you can overtype that if needed. You want to confirm whether the money is owed, so it's owed to you, or it's in hand, it's money that you've got in the client account, and then you can enter that amount in there. Once you're happy, you're going to save. We're looking for a green pop-up to confirm that that balance is posted successfully. Once we've got that pop-up, if we go to the Statement tab of our landlord and we change our date range to include the first of the month, we'll see that balance that we posted there of a £200 receipt, and our landlord now has a £200 balance in hand. So that will now display in Expedagent as £200 we've got in the client account. So it'll just be a case of working through any other balances that we have, either positive or negative, for any of our other landlords or our tenants, and posting those in exactly the same way. With your balances for your landlords, if you are holding those, so they are retentions, they are monies that you're holding on account for works, that kind of thing, what you can do is retain that amount so that that amount doesn't display as monies to be paid to the landlord. The way you'll do that is you'll go onto the property record and the financial details tab, and in the amount to retain on the right hand side, you'll pop the figure in there and you'll save. If I now come back to my landlord record and I refresh that, on the statement tab we'll now see the amount to retain is also displaying as 200 alongside the balance in hand, and my landlord now won't show to be paid until the balance on their account exceeds that 200 that we're retaining. That will allow us to then use that 200 to pay any invoices if we need to, but we won't show for that money to be paid to the landlord themselves. Next function we're going to have a look at is cancelling transactions. So if, for example, we've posted that amount in hand for that landlord and we've realised that we've done that incorrectly, we do have the option to cancel that transaction. Before we look at cancelling transactions, I do just want to draw your attention to the importance of being careful when cancelling transactions. Once you have cancelled something within the system, it has gone. There is no way to retrieve that transaction. So please do be careful with what you are cancelling. Make sure you are aware of the effect cancelling that transaction may have on other transactions. It's always a good idea to limit the amount of staff members who are able to cancel transactions. Maybe you as the super user are going to be the only one that's got the permission to cancel transactions, and you'll have other staff members come to you if they have made any errors within the accounts and need to change those. These are your accounts at the end of the day, so it's important that they're correct and that you don't cause yourself any errors within your accounts by things being cancelled incorrectly. If you are sure you need to cancel something though, the way you're going to do that is from the record the transaction was posted against. So if it was a landlord transaction, such as a balance in this case, or a landlord payment, you'll cancel it from the landlord record. If it was a rent receipt or a rent charge charged to the tenant, you'd cancel it from the tenancy record. So the first point about cancelling your transactions is that you are to be on the record that the transaction relates to. You're then going to right-click Financial and go to Cancel Transactions. The Cancel Transaction screen will default to show you the last 3 months worth of transactions. If you need to cancel something that's older than that, you'll need to change the date range at the top and use the filter button to refresh the screen that you're looking at. You'll then be able to see transactions that are older than that 3-month period. If you can, and you know the date of the transaction that you're cancelling, it's always a good idea to filter just on that date. That way it'll narrow down what you're looking at on the screen and make it easier for you to see what you're trying to cancel. Each transaction that's been posted for that particular person, so the landlord or tenant, will display here. As a rule of thumb, anything with a black downward facing arrow alongside it is linked to another transaction. So those are the ones that you want to be wary of cancelling. If you cancel something that's linked to another transaction, it will have an effect on that other transaction. So it's probably best to check that you're happy and you know exactly what's happening before you make that cancellation. With our opening balance that we've just posted though, here it is, 1st of June, £200. No black downward facing arrow, so we know it's not going to have a knock-on effect on anything else. If we're sure we want to cancel it, we can tick alongside it. Click the red Cancel Transaction button in the top right hand corner. We'll get a pop-up asking us if we're sure because it can't be undone, so we'll select yes on this occasion. Once that's posted successfully, we'll get a pop-up to confirm that it's cancelled, which we can OK. And if we go back to the statement now, the balance in hand is 0. If we change the to date on our statement date range there, there'll be nothing on the screen. Okay, so that's cancelling transactions within the system. That works in an identical way from our tenancy record. So right-click Financial, Cancel Transactions, and from the tenancy record you'll see anything that's been posted to the tenant. The last function that we're going to have a look at within this video will be our journals. An example of why you might need to post a journal within the system would be if you have any bank interest, for example, to post into the client account. The way you can post that is from the top Finance menu and the Account submenu, and you'll have an option for journal transfers. You'll always get the option to set the date for the journal, so in our example of bank interest, we would set that as the date the interest is showing on our bank statement. You'll have your debit and credit nominals, so in our example, our debit nominal is going to be our client bank account, and our credit nominal is going to be our bank interest. You'll then got the option to add the description, so that's then pop the amount in there. You do get the option to assign any records, which can be important with some journals, but with our bank interest, it doesn't relate to anyone in particular. So we're just going to save that there. We're looking out for the green pop-up to confirm that that's posted successfully, and that transaction will then show on our bank rec reports, etc., to reconcile off against our client bank account. That's the last topic for us to cover in this video. Your next video will be your tenancy finance. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video.